Welcome back to the Aubergine Chef. Today we'll be making peach galettes, which is great because it's just about it's actually, I think today is officially the first day of autumn. By the time you see this, it probably won't be anymore. So it's the end of summer, early fall, and peaches are perfectly ripe in season here in Virginia. So I'm super excited to be making this. It took me a while to figure out what kind of galette I wanted to make because you can pretty much use any fruit you want. You'll have to adjust the recipe slightly. But a galette is really just some kind of dough. Usually, I would say 99% of the time, it's pie dough. And then basically pie filling in the center of it. And it's folded up kind of like, so it kind of looks like a Danish. It's not the same method, but it looks kind of like a Danish. So basically, it's kind of like its own self-contained pie, minimal rolling. You don't have to do it in a pie tin or whatever. It's a little bit flatter. And it serves more like a pizza than a pie just because of how thin the slice is. It's fun, it's rustic, it's easy to make. And it's a great way to use up leftover dough and leftover fruit, or especially bruised or overripe fruit, because I have some bruised and overripe peaches that I'm going to use for this to show you how easy it is to use. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the peach filling. Alright, so cutting a peach is actually fairly easy to do. You kind of do it basically like an apple. And it's actually a little bit easier to do if it's firmer, although it does taste a little bit sweeter if it's a little bit riper or bruised a little bit. So all we're going to do is just peel it off. You can use a knife. I like to use a vegetable peeler because, you know, I'm a pastry chef and we get constantly made fun of for that. So don't laugh at my knife skills because I know they're not that great. Alright, next we're going to take a chef knife and carefully cut it down the middle using the pit as the point where we're going to stop cutting through. And then we're going to just pull it apart. And then pick out the pit if we can. And then we're going to cut it into quarters. You can cut off that little bit of skin if it's still on there, or a peel I should say. And then I like to cut out the little inside red parts. It's a little tough. And then for this recipe, you could do slices, but I'm going to do a dice. So just like how we would dice an apple. And then for your filling, you do want to keep at least some of the filling, or some of the peach back, because you want to have a little bit of texture to it, because it's going to get a little bit mushy. The peaches that are in the pot, especially if they're a little bit riper. So if you have ones a little underripe or a little bit firmer, go ahead and save like maybe a handful or two of those pieces, and then we'll stir those in at the end. Alright, so after you get your peaches cut, you can go ahead and weigh out the rest of your ingredients for your peach filling. Now in this pot, I've got 6 ounces of peach juice, and this is the peach juice that I normally use. You can find it in international markets or in the international section of a grocery store. And then I also have just about almost all the peaches in here. This is about the little left that I have. I'm holding back. You can hold back a little bit more if you want. I also have 1 ounce and 1/8 of granulated sugar in this pot, and a 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and a pinch of salt all in the pot together. Now you can see some of my peaches are a little bit browner because they were a little bit more bruised. Again, this is a great recipe for you to use those bruised or a little bit overripe peaches because they don't really have to look all that great because we're going to pretty much smash them up. In this bowl, I have another 1 1/8 ounce of granulated sugar. So in total recipe is 2 1/4 ounces of granulated sugar. And I also have 3/4 of an ounce of cornstarch. And what we're going to do is we're going to mix this together a little bit to kind of break up the cornstarch. So when we add 1.5 ounces of peach juice, it won't get so chunky like when you when it's only cornstarch in the bowl. See, so it just kind of helps break it up a little bit, so it makes it a little bit smoother. So I'm going to get this bowl, this pot on the stove mixed up a little bit. I just wanted to keep it separate so you can see the ingredients, but I'm going to mix it up a little bit and then bring it to a boil on high heat. Alright, so it's just about to a boil now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow it to continue to boil for up to 5 minutes. I'm probably going to do about 4 minutes since the peaches were a little bit softer. At this point, we're kind of reducing the liquid in the pot, but we're also softening the peaches, especially if they're a little bit underripe. Now, again, these are a little bit riper, a little, almost some of them are a little overripe or bruised, so I may not need the full 5 minutes, but try to do at least 4 minutes so the liquid still matches up, so it's a little bit thicker, you know what I mean? And you do want to steadily stir it, so that way everyone gets kind of mixed a little bit, and especially in the later minutes, you want to make sure that you keep moving it around because there's not as much liquid and they can burn a little bit easier. Okay, so I'm coming up to just about the full 5 minutes here. I decided to go ahead and go all the way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reduce the heat to about medium-high. And then I'm going to add in my cornstarch, sugar, and peach juice mixture. Okay, and then we're just going to whisk this in. And we're going to let it cook for about a minute or two until it fully thickens. And so you can see it's already getting nice and thick because it was already at a boil. But we do want to cook it for a little bit longer because if we don't fully cook it, you'll still get a starchy flavor to it. Alright, so just real quick, we're going to add in those last bits of peaches that we didn't cook in. So that way we have a little bit of color and texture to it. And this kind of makes a pretty decent pie filling too. I mean, you would have to have more peaches, obviously. All right, and now we want this filling to cool down to room temperature pretty quickly. We don't want it to get super hard like it would in the refrigerator because of the cornstarch and being really cold and all that. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it on a sheet pan to let it cool down to room temperature. Okay, and then the thinner we spread it, the faster it will cool down. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of plastic wrap and then touch it right to the surface of the peaches so that way a skin doesn't form on the top, just in case. Alright, so while our peach filling cools off, let's go ahead and work on our shortbread dough. Now I've already taken 1 pound 7 ounces, which is almost 6 sticks of butter, and I beat them with the paddle attachment for about 5 minutes until they were light and fluffy. Now we're going to add in 15 ounces of granulated sugar, and we're going to mix that for an additional 2 minutes. Okay, so once your butter and your sugar have mixed together for an extra 2 minutes, go ahead and add in your 4 ounces of egg yolks and just a splash of vanilla extract, or about 1/4 ounce, which is about half a tablespoon. And we're going to mix that in together until it's all combined. Then we're going to scrape down the sides of the bowl. Alright, so after you scrape down the sides of the bowl, go ahead and add in 1 pound 12 ounces of bread flour and 1/8 ounce of salt. Go ahead and mix that together until just combined. Alright, so after you've mixed your dough, it's going to look something like this, and it's not quite ready to roll out yet because we do need it to still be, we need to be a little bit firmer, so we're going to chill it. And what we're going to do is we're going to get the pieces ready for the galettes that we want to do. We're going to portion it out. So we want these portions to be about 4 ounces each, and we only need 8 of them. So looking at this pile of dough, yeah, we're going to have way too much. And the reason I don't like to make a smaller amount of this shortbread recipe is because I don't think it will shrink down very nicely. I haven't tested it, but you can see that the ingredients, well, I got it as a very large scale recipe from school. So when I scaled it down already, I divided it by half. It used to make almost 10 pounds of dough. So this is only about 4 or 5 pounds of dough. So I don't want to make it too much smaller because sometimes recipes can get a little hinky if you can make them too small or too large. So I tested this recipe, I like it, and what's nice is you can freeze it and save it for a very long time, and all you need to do is thaw it out in the fridge, then bring it to room temperature, just slightly room temperature to firm up, and then you can roll it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to portion out 4 ounce balls, which is just about that piece right there, and we're going to make it into a disc shape so that way it's ready for us to roll out because it's a little bit more difficult to roll out a ball than a disc. So I'm going to go ahead and do 8 of those. Okay, and then with the remaining dough you can portion out about 1 pound 1 ounce pieces, and you should get about 2 pieces left over. So then I'm just going to date them for today's date and then freeze them, and then whenever I need them I will just let them thaw out in the refrigerator and then warm up a little bit slightly to room temperature in order to roll them out. Or you can beat them with the rolling pin like Julia Child did. But what's nice is when you write the date on it, I use a little bit of masking tape to write a date on it, and so that way I know how old it is. So that way I'm not ever wondering how old this piece of dough is, especially if I have more than just one kind of shortbread dough in my fridge, or more than one batch, I should say. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these guys into the fridge, these guys into the freezer, and then while these are chilling, I'm going to go ahead and make our cheese filling. Okay, so we're going to make our cheese filling. It's really easy to do. I have on the mixer right now 8 ounces of cream cheese and 4 ounces of mascarpone cheese. We're going to add in 2 3/8 ounces of granulated sugar. I put the cheese on first just to soften it up a little bit because the cream cheese was still a little bit cold. But really, you can put the granulated sugar in at the beginning. So we're going to go ahead and cream that together until it's a nice, smooth, creamy paste. Alright, so then scrape down the sides of your bowl, and then you're going to add 2 egg yolks, which is about 1.5 ounces, a splash of vanilla extract, which is about 1/4 teaspoon, or half a teaspoon, and then just a little bit of lemon zest or orange zest, or both, or whichever, or neither if you don't want to use citrus zest at all. I'm using just a little bit of lemon zest, so maybe about 3/4 of a lemon. We're going to go ahead and just mix that all together. Alright, so the balls of dough have only been in the fridge for about 20 minutes maybe 15 minutes. So they're still a little bit softer than I would like them to be, but we're going to go ahead and work with them anyway. Just be very careful. And we just want to roll them out to about 1/4 inch thickness. Make sure to move it fairly regularly to make sure it's not sticking to the table, and to make sure that you get a round-ish shape. And unlike the pie dough, it's going to be a little bit more delicate, so sometimes it's a little bit easier if you bring the parchment paper to you, and then move the parchment paper to the sheet pan afterward. So we can do about 2 to 3 in a sheet pan, or yeah, on a half sheet pan anyway. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take some of our cheese filling, put it in a piping bag, and then we're going to pipe it into the center of our galette. And try to make the edges a little bit higher than the middle. And you should be using about 2 ounces of the filling. Now we're going to take some of our cooled peach filling. We're going to use about 2.5 ounces of this and put it right on top of the cheese. You know, I think I didn't go out far enough now that I'm not sitting so close to it when I'm piping. So I'm going to spread it out just a little bit with the spoon. Okay, next we're going to fold up the crust, and again, the shortbread's very delicate, so it might break a little bit, but that's okay, because it's going to be a little bit rustic, and the shortbread you can kind of just squish back together too, so don't worry too much about that. And so as you're folding it, you're just doing one section at a time to kind of make kind of like a shape, a star shape almost. And then I don't like to egg wash the shortbread dough because it spreads a little bit, so it gets kind of funny looking when you egg wash it. So let's do it again over here. Alright, now if you have excess flour on your dough, you can take a little brush and kind of just brush it off. Just make sure that you're checking for hairs, especially if you're using like this makeup brush that I'm using. Because this one, the brushes have a tendency to come off a little bit easier. You can use a pastry brush too. Okay? And then I could probably fit one more in this corner right here if I just move these guys over here. But I'm going to go ahead and roll with it because I want the dough to get a little bit cooler before I roll out the next batch. And I'm going to bake these at 400 degrees for about 15 minutes or until the dough is nice and tan brown looking. Alright, so here are the galettes. They're still kind of fresh out of the oven. They've been sitting out for maybe about 10 minutes or so, so they're still kind of hot a little bit, but you can see they kind of spread a little bit because it's a shortbread cookie dough instead of a pie dough, and they kind of hold their shape. What's nice about this dough is you can kind of push it together a little bit to kind of seal in the cracks as you're forming it. But the cheese filling will solidify almost immediately when it hits that hot pan because of the eggs, so you don't have to worry about it leaking out too much, especially since we've already pre-thickened the filling. Alright, so that's how you make peach galettes. Now, I don't think I ever covered why I'm using shortbread dough instead of pie dough. It's mostly just because everybody else was using pie dough, and so I wanted to be a little bit different, and I'm sure you guys have seen pie dough recipes over and over again. So I just wanted to show you that you can really make galettes almost out of anything. Galettes are a fun, easy to customize recipe that you can do almost anything with. You can kind of swap things out, use different flavors. It's just amazing what you could do. What if you put a little bit of sage in with the peach? I bet that would taste pretty good. Or what if you use brown sugar in the filling instead of just white sugar? So there's definitely a lot of different options. The cookie crust, not a lot of room to move around just because how cookies are, especially shortbread. But you could definitely swap it out for pie dough. You can definitely season it with some spices. Now, it's not too many because you don't want the spices to get in the way of the dough spreading or rolling out nicely. So there's definitely a lot of options for you to do. So anyway, I hope you learned a lot today. Thank you for watching. And remember, the Aubergine Chef, demystifying dessert, one recipe at a time.